Good morning and welcome to the December, can't believe it's the end of the year, open meeting of the Federal Communications Commission. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce the agenda for today?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Good morning to you and good morning, Commissioners. For today's meeting, you will hear 6 items for your consideration. First, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking that would propose rules to protect consumers from video service junk fees, including early termination fees and billing cycle fees. Second, you will consider a second report and order, second further notice of proposed rulemaking and waiver order to combat illegal robotext by facilitating blocking of illegal robotext, codifying do not call rules for texting, and closing a loophole that allows certain callers to inundate consumers with unwanted robocalls and robotexts. The item also seeks comment on further efforts to combat illegal robocalls and robotexts. Third, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking that tentatively concludes that hearing aid compatibility for 100% of wireless handset models is an achievable objective and seeks comment on proposals to implement this requirement. Fourth, you will consider a fourth report and order, declaratory ruling, and third further notice of proposed rulemaking to promote the deployment of broadband infrastructure by making the pole attachment process faster, more transparent, and more cost-effective by adopting rules allowing for faster resolution of pole attachment disputes and providing pole attachers with more detailed information about the poles they plan to use as part of their broadband build-outs. The Commission will also seek comment on ways to further facilitate the approval process for pole attachment applications and make ready to enable quicker broadband deployment. Fifth, you will consider a third report and order to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of the rural health care program. The improvements under consideration would reduce burdens on and enhance flexibility for program participants, simplify existing program rules, and free up for other uses unclaimed program support. Sixth, you will consider a report in order to update the Commission's data breach notification rules in order to ensure that providers are held accountable in their obligations to safeguard sensitive customer information and provide customers with the tools needed to protect themselves in the event that their data is compromised. This is your agenda for today. Please note the items listed as 7, implementation of the Low Power Protection Act amending amateur radio rules for greater flexibility in data communications, and 8, an enforcement action in the December 6, 2023 Sunshine Notice have been adopted by the Commission and deleted from today's agenda. Today's first item is titled Protecting Consumers from Early Termination and Billing Cycle Fees and will be presented by the Media Bureau, and Holly Sauer, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Ms. Sauer, please proceed.
Good morning, Chairwoman and Commissioners. Today, the Media Bureau presents a notice of proposed rulemaking that addresses junk fee billing practices by video service providers. These junk fees can limit consumer choice and thus negatively impact competition in the video marketplace. Joining me at the table are Deputy Bureau Chief Hillary DeNigro and Maria Malarkey and Katie Costello of the Media Bureau's Policy Division. Katie will present the item.
Chairwoman and Commissioners, we are pleased to present this notice of proposed rulemaking addressing 2 specific junk fee billing practices imposed on consumers by cable and direct broadcast satellite video service providers. The first is early termination fees. Early termination fees require subscribers to pay a fee for terminating a video service contract prior to its expiration date. This makes it costly for consumers to switch services during a contract term and may result in limiting consumer choice and negatively impacting competition among video service providers. The second category is billing cycle fees, which require video service subscribers to pay for a complete billing cycle even if the subscriber terminates service prior to the end of that cycle. Billing cycle fees penalize consumers for terminating service by requiring them to pay for services they no longer choose to receive. The notice proposes to adopt customer service protections that prohibit cable and satellite video service providers from imposing a fee for the early termination of a video service contract. The notice also proposes to adopt customer service protections that require the same entities to grant subscribers a prorated credit or rebate for the remaining whole days in a monthly or periodic billing cycle after the cancellation of service. The proposed rules are part of the Commission's ongoing commitment to consumer protection in the video services marketplace. The Communications Act requires the Commission to establish customer service standards to increase consumer protection for cable video service subscribers. The Act also provides the Commission broad statutory authority to impose public interest or other requirements on satellite video service providers. The Media Bureau recommends that the Commission adopt the notice of proposed rulemaking and request editorial privileges to make any necessary technical or conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
Thanks. 2 years ago, President Biden signed an executive order that called on agencies to regulate the fees or rates charged by providers in the communications sector. Today, the FCC acts on that call in one context, with cable providers. And are we singling out cable providers because they are sort of rolling up market share right now in the video marketplace? They're not. They're losing share to lots of other types of video providers, including ones that use technologies that are not regulated at the FCC, regulated by the FCC at all. Are we choosing to go down the path of regulating rates for cable providers because our legal authority to do so is exceptionally clear as compared to other sectors of the communications industry? The answer there is no. You see, Congress expressly gave the FCC authority to regulate certain cable rates in the 1992 Act. But seeing the FCC's experience with that authority, Congress thought the better of it and raked that authority back in the 1996 Act. Interestingly, that 1992 Cable Act also gave states some authority to regulate cable rates, provided that those providers weren't subject to effective competition. We'll flash forward to the Wheeler-era FCC, which determined that cable providers are presumptively subject to effective competition nationwide. And with that decision, we effectively eliminated the authority of states to engage in rate regulation of cable. So far, so good. FCC no longer has rate regulating authority when it comes to cable, and states effectively don't have rate regulation authority anymore when it comes to cable either. So how do we propose to move forward here? Well, it turns out there is a provision that dates back to the 1984 Cable Act that the FCC cites. So I dusted off the 1984 Cable Act and looked at it thinking maybe there's a provision there that expressly talks about rate regulating authority. And it talks about imposing customer service requirements on cable companies. And maybe Congress is using customer service requirements as a shorthand for rate regulating, so I looked at that. And that provision has to do with rules imposing limits on the wait times when customers call in to customer service centers. Not exactly a very clear grant of authority to engage in rate regulation. Now, look, I tend to impose a really high bar on voting against NPRMs. My view is we get to ask as many questions as we want. I try not to sort of push back on questions when colleagues want to ask them in the NPRM. That's my starting point. But there is a handful of exceptions to that rule, and unfortunately today is one of them. I cannot sign on to the Biden administration's inexorable march toward regulating rates that are charged. And so for today's decision, I'm a dissent, but I do want to thank the Bureau for all of their hard work on the item. Appreciate it, but I'll be a no.
Commissioner Starks.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. There are some items that come before me at the FCC that hit me not just as a regulator, but as an everyday consumer. I felt that way about our June 2023 NPRM proposing to require MVPDs to clearly provide the bottom line all-in price for video service to consumers in both promotional materials and on subscribers' bills. I feel that way similarly about today's NPRM, which follows that item as well. Obscuring the bottom line fee isn't fair to consumers, and neither is imposing exorbitant, unexpected fees on consumers canceling their service. We've begun our inquiry on the former. Today, we ask questions about the latter. Take, for example, the issue, as we heard, of early termination fees, or ETFs. I know what it's like to cancel a service and get slapped with startlingly high termination fees. I'd hazard a guess that most of us in the room do. It's an experience that is far too common. The Biden administration's executive order on promoting competition in America encouraged the FCC to consider prohibiting unjust or unreasonable early termination fees for end-user communications contracts. But first, we have to understand how fees like this may be used in MVPD contracts. Do they unfairly prohibit consumers from switching providers? Are there circumstances in which they do benefit consumers? For example, by giving consumers a choice between a costlier month-to-month contract or a cheaper long-term contract with an ETF. But even if those situations exist, are there ways we can protect consumers from what are unreasonable fees? And so those are the types of questions that we're asking today. I truly look forward to seeing the record develop. Not only is today's NPRM a conversation with the FCC's actions in June and all-in pricing, it's in step with our sister agencies across the government as well. From the FTC to CFPB, the government is pursuing proposals and advisories to protect consumers from unjust and unreasonable fees across the industry. As President Biden himself said, this is, quote, just about simple fairness. I could not agree more with that. Thank you. It has my support.
Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. This item proposes to prohibit cable and satellite operators from charging early termination fees and so-called billing cycle fees. I've never met a consumer who has not felt hard done by paying fees that they'd prefer not to pay. Certainly, I've paid fees I would have preferred not to pay, and I wished at the time that I didn't have to pay them. So is that the end of the analysis? Well, for this commission, perhaps. At the behest of the Biden administration, commission leadership and my colleagues across the aisle today approve an item notionally designed to improve consumer welfare through, quote, prohibiting unjust or unreasonable early termination fees for end-user communication contracts, and by, quote, enabling consumers to more easily switch providers. I say notional because the relationship between consumer welfare and the rules this item proposes is actually negative. Let me be clear, consumers will be worse off after these rules are adopted, provided that they survive legal challenge, including a challenge to the almost certainly inadequate Section 632 authority on which they are based. The result is that consumers will pay more for their cable packages. This isn't advanced economic theory, this is basic horse sense. By replacing consumer choice with the sacerdotal wisdom of the new regulatory clerics, the Commission proposes to leave consumers worse off than before. Here's how. Let's treat ETFs first. The modal consumer who signs up for service with an MVPD, and to be clear, in this comment, I will use MVPD to mean both MVPDs and DBS providers, generally has at least two options. One option is discounted service, which typically comes with a contract for a service term. Some of those contracts do have an early termination fee, often at a somewhat lower price relative to other contracts, and some do not. Then the other option is a higher rate month-to-month service agreement. In the first case, a consumer terminating service prior to the end of the term is sometimes obligated to pay a fee, and in the second, she is not. Any consumer wishing to avoid the prospect of an early termination fee has the option ex ante to avoid the fee. Just don't sign up for the plan with the fee. Seems simple enough. But some may say, what about the consumer who signs up for the plan but is then forced by circumstance to terminate the contract? Say she has to move for a new job. The prior MVPD is not available in her new location. Is the fee not punitive in this case? Well, tabling for the moment that the consumer presumably knew or could have discovered what she was signing up for, and tabling for the moment that the contract terms provide for a variety of circumstances under which the ETF is not owed, the consumer is still better off, generally speaking, in the second half of service term contracts than she otherwise would have been, having derived countervailing benefits by that point. If a contract for video service offers a $10 monthly discounted promotional rate for a year, it is often joined with an early termination fee that amounts to, in the case of one major provider that my team looked at, $110.
the early termination fee declines, generally by 1/12 or 1/11 per month. This is a pretty common industry practice. So in about half the cases, assuming that terminations are sampled randomly throughout a contract's lifetime, the consumer is better off having paid the ETF and received the discounted service relative to month. Indeed, the discount is often greater on a monthly basis than the ETF reduction, putting the ETF paying consumer in the money even faster. This is not the only case, but it's a representative and I think archetypical one. But now we are proposing to eliminate the prospect of the early termination fee altogether and constructively proposing to eliminate the discounted rate that it supports, at least the portion of the discount equivalent to the revenue lost by ETFs. And we're doing this in the name of consumer welfare. I'm not sure what animates the Commission's logic here. Does the Commission imagine that the invisible hand of this highly regulated market will keep contractual prices level after ETFs are removed? Those same market forces that the Commission evidently discounts today by undercutting the commercial judgment of MVPDs. Or does it imagine that MVPDs will, out of their gracious love of consumers, voluntarily fully retain today's long-term contractual discounts while merely forgoing ETF revenue? I suppose we'll find out which of these twin naivetés rules when the supposed consumer advocates, whose very jobs require the invention of more and more phantasmagoric consumer harms, furnish the Commission with their conclusory count in the record. Turning briefly to what we term in the item billing cycle fees, what the rest of the world calls monthly billing. Here are some folks who are not going to take your call if you ask for part of your billing cycle fee back in your subscription service. Netflix, Hulu, Max, Disney, Paramount, YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Do we typically consider these services burdensome on consumers, difficult to cancel? Is it hard to switch between and among them? Given their churn figures, I would be surprised to learn that that was the case. Consumer choice in the video marketplace abounds, and today consumers are exercising that choice, and they're exercising it by marching right out the door from traditional MVPDs. Today's proposed action on monthly billing will make it marginally harder to operate as an MVPD, in that it puts a costly burden on them that no other video marketplace participant is required to bear. It may not be the proverbial straw on the camel's back, but the pro-consumer effect of today's proposal will certainly be a mirage. Rather than improving the consumer experience, it will just make the experience for most MVPD consumers marginally worse, as MVPDs inevitably turn to recouping lost revenues in the form of higher monthly service costs overall. Because let's be clear, our so-called pro-consumer proposal today requires angelic forbearance on the parts of MVPDs to actually have a pro-consumer effect. Putting this plainly, this proposal would reduce consumer choice, make it harder for MVPDs to compete in the unified video marketplace, and it won't save consumers one thin dime. Today's proposal is merely an optical victory. Now that the Commission has a full slate of commissioners, I'm also worried that today's move is a move towards crypto rate regulation slouching towards approval. So I'm afraid I must dissent.
Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you, Chairwoman. As the video market continues to evolve at a rapid pace that shows no signs of abating, initiating this rulemaking to seek comment on cable operators and direct broadcast satellite providers' assessment of early termination fees and billing cycle fees is timely. Consumers have more choices than ever before, and it is imperative that we understand whether such billing practices have the effect of inhibiting subscribers from choosing the video services they want or result in consumers paying fees for video services they did not choose to receive as we consider these rules. I want to thank the Chairwoman for her leadership on this item and for working with me to ensure that we ask broad questions about the state of the video marketplace as we consider these important issues. I look forward to reviewing a robust record. And thank you also to the Media Bureau for your hard work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioners. If you are one of millions of people in this country who subscribe to cable television or satellite service, one day you might want to end that subscription. You may move, you might want to switch providers, or you might want to check out new competitors offering different kinds of service. When that happens, you will have to contact your cable or satellite provider. If you've ever been on one of those calls, you know they are no fun. They take too long. Plus, you can get charged early termination fees when all you want to do is shut the service down. On top of that, you can get stuck with paying for weeks of service you do not want just because you cut it off early in the billing cycle. Consumers are tired of these junk fees. They now have more choices when it comes to video content. but these friction-filled tactics to keep us subscribing to our current providers are aggravating and unfair. So today we kick off a rulemaking to put an end to these practices. We propose restricting early termination fees and requiring providers to grant subscribers credits or rebates for the remaining days in a billing cycle following the cancellation of service. We ask questions about legal authority, the impact of our proposed rules, and any alternatives we should consider. This rulemaking is part of a broader effort to make billing across the economy and across communications more transparent and more fair. Last year, we adopted broadband nutrition labels requiring carriers to disclose service terms to consumers in an easy and simple way. This year, we proposed all-in pricing for cable, television, and satellite providers so that the advertised price for video service would actually be the price customers pay when the bill arrives. These initiatives are important because consumers know when they are being stuck with charges that are unfair, fees that no one told them about, and practices that try their patience and waste their time. We can do something about this, and we should. Thank you to the staff responsible for this rulemaking, including Katie Costello, Hillary DeNegro, Maria Malarkey, Brendan Murray, and Holly Sauer from the Media Bureau, Douglas Galby, Kim Markuch, and George Williams from the Office of Economics and Analytics, Susan Aaron and Dave Consal from the Office of General Counsel, Jocelyn James from the Office of Communications Business Opportunities, and Kathy Williams from the Office of Managing Director. And with that, we will proceed to a vote on this item. Commissioner Carr.
Dissent.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Dissent.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, can you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, item 2 on your agenda is titled Targeting and Eliminating Unlawful Text Messages and will be presented by the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. Alejandra Rourke, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Rourke, please proceed.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. Today I am pleased to introduce on behalf of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau a second report and order, a second for the notice of proposed rulemaking, and a waiver that, if adopted, would take significant steps to combat unwanted and illegal text messages, and in one case, unwanted and illegal calls. The item for vote today would adopt new text blocking requirements and better protect consumers in a multitude of ways, including by codifying that texts are covered by the do not call list protections and by closing the lead generator loophole. The notice of proposed rulemaking, meanwhile, would seek comment on further steps the Commission can take to better protect consumers. Before turning the presentation over to the CGB staff, I would like to thank the Enforcement, Public Safety and Homeland Security, Wireline Competition and Wireless Telecommunication Bureaus, and the Offices of Communication Business Opportunities, Economics and Analytics, and General Counsel for their valuable assistance. Today I am joined by Wesley Pratt, our new Consumer and Policy Division Chief, Mika Savir, which is here in the room with us, thank you, and Drew Burnett, Attorney Advisor in CGB's Consumer Policy Division, who will present the item.
Thank you, Alejandro. Thank you, Alejandro. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. Though the Commission has made significant strides to protect consumers from unwanted and illegal calls, unwanted and illegal texts are a comparatively new problem, and they are on the rise. Text messaging is one of the most popular forms of communication. Texting connects people to friends and family, businesses to customers, and governments to constituents. Scam texts can be incredibly harmful and may include phishing links or even load malware onto the recipient's phone. The order, further notice, and waiver order, if adopted, would take further steps to protect consumers from these irritating and sometimes dangerous communications. The order would adopt several new requirements to protect consumers from unwanted and illegal text messages and, in one case, unwanted and illegal calls. The rules in the order specifically address short message service and multimedia messaging service. First, the order would require terminating providers to block texts from a particular number following Commission notification of suspected illegal text messages from that number, unless their investigation determines that the identified text messages were not illegal. This rule does not replace voluntary blocking already done by mobile wireless providers, but instead ensures the providers block illegal texts their current blocking may not capture. Second, the order would codify that the National Do Not Call Registry protections apply to text messages. This means that texters must have consumers' prior express invitation or permission before sending a marketing text to a wireless number in the registry, which should both deter illegal texts and make enforcement easier. Third, the order would encourage providers to make email to text an opt-in service as a way to reduce the number of fraudulent messages consumers receive. Finally, the order would close the lead generator loophole by adopting a new rule requiring prior express written consent under the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, or the TCPA, to be obtained one seller at a time. This rule would also require that such consent must be in response to a clear and conspicuous disclosure to the consumer, and that the content of the calls or texts made pursuant to this consent must be logically and topically associated with the website where the consumer gave consent. This rule applies to both calls and texts and will prohibit abuse of consumer consent by comparison shopping and other websites. This rule is focused on consent required under the TCPA. It means that businesses, including small businesses, can still obtain leads from third-party comparison websites and make live calls pursuant to those leads. It also means that businesses can still interact with consumers using methods that do not require TCPA consent. Moreover, the rule should help small businesses that may not be on the Do Not Call registry from having their lines tied up with unwanted calls, and will provide legal certainty as to how callers and texters can demonstrate valid consent when that consent was obtained by a third party. The further notice of proposed rulemaking would seek comment on further steps to stop unwanted and illegal texts. First, it would propose to require additional text blocking following Commission notification. This proposal would require originating mobile wireless providers to block following Commission notification of illegal texts, and, if a provider fails to do so, would require all downstream mobile wireless providers to block all of that provider's texts. This requirement is modeled on the Commission's existing requirement for voice service providers. The further notice would also seek comment on other options for requiring providers to block unwanted or illegal texts, such as requiring blocking based on reasonable analytics. Second, the further notice would seek further comment on text message authentication, including the status of any industry standards for such authentication. Third, the further notice would seek comment on requiring providers to respond to traceback requests from the Commission, civil or criminal law enforcement within 24 hours, consistent with the Commission's existing rules for gateway voice service providers and the recently adopted rule for all voice service providers that will take effect in January 8th, 2024. Finally, the further notice would propose to require providers to make email to text services opt-in, so that subscribers wishing to receive these types of messages would first have to opt into the service. The waiver order would adopt a limited waiver to allow providers to use the reassigned numbers database to determine whether a number that the Commission has ordered to be blocked has been permanently disconnected. This waiver will help prevent blocking of lawful texts from a new subscriber to the number. The Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
Thanks so much to the chair for the work on this item, and thanks as well for agreeing to some slight tweaks that I thought were worthwhile. One was sort of tightening up an illegal authority issue, so thanks for agreeing to that, and for making sure that we're targeting here the illegal robotexts that are the ire of so many. As I've always said, reasonable actions that are going to crack down on illegal robotext or illegal robocalls are ones that are going to garner my support at the end of the day, and that's where I land here. So thanks to the team for the work on it. Has my support.
Thank you. Commissioner Starks.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Combating robocalls and robotexts is like whack-a-mole. I know I'm not the first on this dais that has said that, but it really is true. We shut down one scam, another arises. We close one pathway for illegal and unwanted calls, and a fraudster creates another. But this is, of course, no game, and the FCC has not backed down. We're adapting our tactics, creating new ones here, and adapting for real. That's what today's order does. First, we impose additional text blocking requirements on providers, building on those we adopted in March of this year. Second, we target the lead generator loophole that we heard about in particular. Consumers have a right to control who contacts them. And just because you want to comparison shop does not mean you agree to blanket consent to be robocalled and robotexted by strange, unrelated parties looking to prey. And finally, I'm glad we asked questions about what other steps we can take to stay ahead of scammers, including whether and how to impose certain parts of our robocall playbook here, including traceback, including authentication onto these robotext efforts. And here, as always, we'll benefit from the knowledge and input of industry and our public interest partners. Thank you for the hard work and leadership here. Chairwoman, thank you to the team for the hard work as well. Thank you. It has my support.
Thanks. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. I, like everyone in this building, and indeed on Earth, hate receiving illegal and unwanted robotexts. I'm pleased to approve every word of this item that does not relate to our approach to the so-called one-to-one consent for robotext in the lead generation context. Unsurprisingly, the rest of the item is more or less well-trod regulatory territory that members of the Commission and staff thoroughly understand. However, as our approach to one-to-one consent in the lead generation context, we're over our skis, and as to that only I dissent. I would have been pleased to support the approach laid out in the NPRM to constrain consumer consent to robotexting to only those entities, quote, logically and topically related, unquote, to the predicate of the consumer inquiry. I voted for that because it made sense. That is, if I give consent to be robotexted about car insurance efforts, I expect to receive text about car insurance, not garage doors, not car loans. Great, makes sense. That proposal aligns typical consumer expectations around what in their consent to be robotexted consists, and it would eliminate the abusive practices contemplated in the NPRM. I even supported asking about one-to-one consent in a further notice, because there is possibly a way to accomplish one-to-one consent that doesn't break the backs of American small businesses that rely on lead generation. Not probably, but at least possibly. We could have developed a fulsome record that actually contemplated that issue, instead of parachuting in an approach at the 11th hour that caught American small businesses flat-footed and risks benefiting only the plaintiff's bar. Unfortunately, by adopting one-to-one consent on a factually thin record, we today clumsily rush to save the American consumer from herself by sticking our finger in yet another new pie, vigorously stirring, calling a resulting mess a cobbler, insisting that it's healthier, and leaving the janitorial staff of brick-and-mortar Main Street mortgage lenders, insurance brokers, real estate agents, and the like to clean up. My colleagues across the aisle worry that if we relax one-to-one consent, predatory lenders will rush into the regulatory gap left. Predatory lenders, those conscientious respecters of regulation. If we regulate robotext consent hard enough, surely an offshore Cayman-funded organization with a call center in Belize, relying principally on home-rolled SEO to dominate SERP visibility and using algorithmic approaches to beating Google's ad restrictions, will be brought to heel. No, these people don't need to buy leads. Our action today does nothing to prevent their abusive behavior at all. Nothing. It's just another paper consumer victory for a commission that's as focused on appearances as reality. Speaking of appearances, the factual record on the question of one-to-one consent is so thin, and the order is so impoverished in its reasoning supporting a rule upending the consumer financial products industry, that it gives every appearance of an arbitrary and capricious action by the Commission. But listen, I'm not the only one with concerns. You don't need to take the word of a Republican commissioner in the minority. It's easy for me to take pot shots. Consider instead the word of the Small Business Administration, who admonished the Commission to rethink today's order and to further consider our approach to one-to-one consent. The SBA's Office of Advocacy indicated not just that the small businesses of America are deeply concerned by today's action, but that it may indeed formally fail regulatory flexibility analysis and that it fails to account for the impact this action will have on small American businesses. Quite so. And I don't think wordsmithing can rehabilitate a requirement this unsupported. Again, as to the rest of the item, I'm delighted to approve, but as to this narrow issue that easily could have been fixed by further notice, I have to strongly dissent. Thank you.
Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. Choosing the right product or service in a sea of options can be an overwhelming task. That is why consumers turn to comparison shopping websites to make the process of choosing the right product or service, be it a loan, medical insurance, or real estate, easier, less overwhelming. When what seemed like a solution to staying afloat in a sea of too many choices turns into a tsunami of unwanted robocalls and robotexts, it is our job to step in. The order we adopt today makes clear that businesses interested in robocalling and robotexting consumers will need to receive specific consent from a consumer in order to send those types of communications. In considering this item, I thought deeply about its effect on small businesses. Small businesses turn to lead generators to get leads to potential customers. While this order alters the way some lead generator websites have operated, this decision does not foreclose other marketing options. First, as long as a consumer provides prior express written consent to receiving marketing through robocalls and robotexts, a small business can still use the leads obtained through lead generators to make robocalls and robotexts. Small businesses can also contact customer leads via a non-auto-dialed calls and non-auto-dialed texts, provided they are not on the do not call list. They can contact them through email and even through mail. I believe that reducing the harm to consumers resulting from a tsunami of robotexts and robocalls to which they did not consent outweighs the discomfort of the change we adopt in this order. I want to thank the Office of the Chairwoman for accepting our edits to this item, incorporating concerns for the small business community, and for directing the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau to conduct outreach and provide education focusing on compliance to small business lead generators and small business lead buyers. And thank you to the Bureau for your hard work on this important item. I approve. I will now share my remarks in Spanish. Elegir el producto o servicio adecuado en un mar de opciones puede ser una tarea abrumadora. Es por eso que los consumidores recurren a sitios web de comparación de precios para que el proceso de elección de producto o servicio adecuado, ya sea un préstamo, un seguro médico o un inmueble, sea más fácil y menos abrumador. Pero cuando lo que parecía una solución se convierte en un tsunami de llamadas automáticas y mensajes de texto automáticos no deseados, la Comisión Federal de las Comunicaciones intervenimos para ayudar. Hoy requerimos que las empresas obtengan el consentimiento del consumidor por escrito antes de utilizar llamadas automáticas y mensajes de textos automáticos al tratar de conseguir su negocio. La decisión que tomamos hoy deja claro que las empresas también deberán recibir el consentimiento del propio consumidor para poder enviar ese tipo de comunicaciones. Es importante proteger a los consumidores de mensajes de textos automáticos y llamadas automáticas a los cuales no dieron su consentimiento y es por eso tomamos medidas hoy. Elegir el producto o servicio adecuado en un mar de opciones debe ser algo que los consumidores piden. Gracias.
Thank you, Commissioners. It's the holiday season. This is the time of year when we are ramping up our online shopping, donating to charities, and maybe if we are lucky, planning for some downtime with family and friends. But it is also a time of year when scammers are coming up with new schemes to cheat us through our phones. They know that sending us a message about a package we never ordered or a payment that never went through, along with a link to a shady website, is a quick and easy way to get us to fall prey to fraud. These messages make a mess out of our phones, but they do more than that. They erode trust in the networks we all count on to communicate. We need to find every way we can under the law to stop these junk robocalls and robotexts from reaching us on our devices. And because scam artists are nimble during the holiday season and throughout the year, we need to regularly update our policies to stop this stuff from coming over the line. The changes we make today matter. We make clear that when the FCC identifies a number sending this junk, carriers must block texts from that number before they reach your phone. Likewise, we make clear that the National Registry to prevent unwanted calls applies not only to calls, but also to texts. Then we go a step further, and we shut down a loophole that is a significant source of a growing number of robocalls and robotexts. This loophole has been identified as a problem by countless consumer groups, members of Congress, and state attorneys general because it creates a marketplace for our numbers, with companies buying and selling access to our phones and in the process cranking up the number of unwanted calls and texts we receive. Let me explain. Imagine you are shopping online. You give a business your number, and in a single click, you are also giving that business the right to sell and share your number with hundreds, if not thousands, of other businesses that may use it to send you robocalls and robotexts that you never asked for, do not want, and do not need. They bury it in the fine print, so you do not realize when you make that one click, you are authorizing all kinds of incoming junk to your phone. This is called the lead generator loophole. And it is a big reason why unwanted robocalls and robotexts are multiplying on our phones. So today, we put an end to this loophole. We make clear that any company that wants to use robocalls and robotexts in their business, well, they have to obtain one-to-one consent. That means consumers get back the power to pick who they want to communicate with and when. Then, to make sure we keep updating our efforts to stop unwanted calls and texts, we seek comment on some additional ideas we have to address them, including blocking through originating service providers, using authentication practices for texting, and inquiring about texting response to traceback requests. I look forward to the record that develops. I look forward to putting an end to illegal robocalls and robotexts, and I want to make one thing clear. We're not going to stop until we do. Thank you to so many at the agency who worked on this effort, including Mark Stone, Aaron Garza, Wesley Platt, Christy Thornton, Zach Champ, Jerusha Burnett, Mika Savier, Rebecca Marconi, Robert Aldrich, Kimberly Wild, and James Brown from the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, Christy Thompson, Daniel Stepanisic, Caitlin Barbas, and Jane Van Benton from the Enforcement Bureau, Jonathan Lecter, Connor Ferraro, Elizabeth Drugula, Adam Copeland, Jody May, Melissa Droller-Kirkle, Chris Laughlin, and Zachary Ross from the Wireline Competition Bureau, Kenneth Carlberg and David Firth from the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, Carrie Hicks, Susanna Larson, Jennifer Salhas, Barbara Esbin, Arpan Sura, Garnet Hanley, and John Lockwood from the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, Joy Ragsdale, Jocelyn James, and Shauna Wilkerson from the Office of Communications Business Opportunities, Michelle Schaefer, Patrick Brogren, Emily Talaga, Kim Malkuch, Andrew Wise, Eugene Kiselev, Eric Ralph, and Mark Montano from the Office of Economics and Analytics, and Andrea Kearney, Rick Mallon, Derek Yeo, Jeffrey Steinberg, Kathleen Fulp, Anjali Singh, Michael Jansen, Karen Schroeder, Douglas Klein, Marcus Mayer, and Shin Yu from the Office of the General Counsel. We will proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approved to sending in part.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
And the chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, can you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, item 3 on your agenda is titled Achieving 100% Wireless Handset Model Hearing Aid Compatibility, and it will be presented by the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. Joel Taubenblatt, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you so much, Madam Secretary. Mr. Taubenblatt, when you are ready, please proceed.
Good morning, Chairwoman and Commissioners. Today, the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau is pleased to present for your consideration an item that would put the Commission on a path towards reaching its long-standing goal of 100% hearing aid compatibility of wireless handset models. I would like to thank the WTB team for their hard work on this item, as well as the Office of Engineering and Technology and the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau and other bureaus and offices for their contributions to the item. With me at the table are Barbara Esben, Deputy Chief of the Wireless Bureau, Garnet Hanley, Chief of the Bureau's Competition and Infrastructure Policy Division, Susanna Larson, Deputy Chief of that division, and Eli Johnson, Senior Attorney in that division. Eli will present the item.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. The Wireless Telecommunications Bureau presents to you today a notice of proposed rulemaking that builds on the Commission's long-standing commitment of ensuring that all Americans, including those with hearing loss, are able to access communication services on an equal basis. The proposed notice furthers this objective by seeking comment on how the Commission can achieve its goal of requiring all handset models to be hearing aid compatible, HAC. To this end, the notice proposes to adopt a stakeholder proposal for reaching a 100% HAC requirement with certain modifications in order to ensure that all handset models provide full accessibility for those with hearing loss, while at the same time ensuring that the HAC rules do not discourage or impair the development of improved technology. The notice tentatively concludes that a 100% HAC requirement for wireless handset models offered or imported for use in the United States is achievable under the factors set forth under Section 710E of the Communications Act. As part of this determination, the notice seeks comment on adopting a broader definition of HAC that would allow the use of Bluetooth coupling between handset models and hearing aids. Specifically, the notice proposes that after the expiration of the relevant transition periods, 100% of the handset models that manufacturers and service providers offer or import for use in the United States must be HAC certified. Under this proposal, all handset models would be required to meet an acoustic coupling requirement and either a telecoil or a Bluetooth coupling requirement. The notice proposes that at least 85% of all handset models would have to meet acoustic and telecoil coupling requirements, and at least 15% of all handset models would have to meet acoustic and Bluetooth coupling requirements. The notice proposes to broaden the definition of HAC to include Bluetooth coupling technology and seeks comment on whether to incorporate a specific non-proprietary Bluetooth standard into the HAC rules, or to allow market conditions to determine which Bluetooth technology is used for coupling handsets to hearing aids. In addition, the notice seeks comment on whether the Commission should include volume control as part of its 100% HAC requirement, and whether it should continue to allow previously HAC-certified handset models to be grandfathered, or whether it should determine that a 100% HAC benchmark could only be met with handset models certified on the latest HAC certification standards. In order to reach the 100% HAC benchmark, the notice proposes a 24-month transition period for handset manufacturers, a 30-month transition period for nationwide service providers, and a 42-month transition period for non-nationwide service providers. Finally, the notice seeks comment on a number of implementation issues related to the 100% HAC proposal to ensure that consumers have the information that they need to make informed purchasing decisions and to reduce regulatory burden on handset manufacturers and service providers. These proposals include 1, requirements for HAC settings and handset models, 2, revised labeling and disclosure rules, 3, revised website, record retention, and reporting requirements, 4, the posting of company contact information for consumers with questions about a company's HAC handset models, and 5, whether the HAC rules section should be renamed to better reflect what the section covers. The Wireless Telecommunications Bureau recommends that the Commission adopt the proposed notice and requests editorial privileges to make technical or conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear comments from the bench. We'll start with Commissioner Carr.
Thanks so much to the team for the work on this. I think the wonders of the mobile wireless world should, to paraphrase a line from a good friend of mine, be available to everyone, everywhere. I think we make some good strides today towards doing exactly that. This is a important issue. I'm glad that we're making some advancements today that'll help deliver on that promise that I think we're all committed to, and the Communications Act importantly commits us to. So I look forward to the record developing here. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Starks.
Yes, thank you. Everyone in America deserves access to modern communications. That includes, of course, Americans with disabilities, in particular those who are hearing impaired. And that's why I am deeply proud to support today's notice of proposed rulemaking. This proposal puts us down a path to ensure that every single smartphone sold in America can be used with hearing aids. Every model, all of them, as we heard, 100%. Reaching 100% compatibility will give hearing impaired consumers more choice, and that's reason enough to invest in making it a reality. But our hack efforts also show that we can absolutely achieve equal access to communications without compromise. It's going to take a little vision, hard work, time, innovation, commitment, resolve, and collaboration. But whether we're talking hearing aid compatibility or the digital divide, don't ever tell me that 100% is impossible. Speaking of hard work, this item was only made possible by years, truly, of collaboration amongst industry, consumer groups, standard organizations, and of course, many of you, all of you sitting here at the table and in government. For all of those who contributed, including our great staff there in WTB, thank you for your hard work and efforts and for leading the way. This is a great item, Chairwoman. As technical matters raised in the item show, we still have plenty of work left to do, and so we're counting on each of you to keep up the hard work. It has my full support.
Well put. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. I'm happy to support today's item and to join my colleagues in appreciation of WTB in particular for their work on it. I'd like to, however, to specifically recognize Eli Johnson's work on this, so thank you. I understand there's been some 10 years of working on hack issues that's gotten to this point. And if you look at the item, you can see the incredible amount of detail that has to be gotten right, partly coordinating with industry, partly coordinating with groups in society. It's not enough to just make an order. You have to figure out how every little bit of that is going to play out and how it's and how is as well how to robustify it for future developments. So I think this is just in the finest traditions of the FCC, and it's part of what makes the FCC such a great agency. So, but I don't want to just focus on one person because obviously a lot of people worked on this really hard. So thanks to everyone at the old bureaus for their hard work on this item.
Thank you. Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. This is a good item. I want to thank the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau for your good work on it, and I approve.
Hearing loss is a big deal. More than 37 million Americans have some form of hearing difficulty. Among older adults, it's especially prevalent. And it's also common among veterans, particularly among those who served in Iraq and Afghanistan. But technology, of course, is also a big deal, and we can use it to make sure those struggling with hearing loss have access to modern communications. Well, as we just heard, the agency has been at work at this for a long time. Today, we reach a new milestone. That is because in this rulemaking, we make clear that in the United States, we believe it is possible for 100% of mobile wireless handsets to be fully compatible with hearing aids. That means every mobile handset that is imported or used in this country is accessible to everyone with hearing challenges. This is the right thing to do. It is also the right time to do it because access to hearing aids has never been easier. Just over a year ago, the Food and Drug Administration took steps to pave the way for a new category of over-the-counter hearing aids. This has made hearing aids more accessible and affordable than ever before. So now let's make wireless handsets work for those with hearing aids like never before. I appreciate the educational and research institutions, equipment manufacturers, wireless carriers, and advocates for those with hearing loss who have worked so hard with the Hearing Aid Compatibility Task Force to get us to this point. It is historic. And in a nod to the past, I also want to acknowledge that it was 50 years ago, this very year, that this kind of work on accessibility began in earnest when the Organization for the Use of the Telephone was founded by two senior citizens seeking to ensure public payphones were hearing aid compatible. We follow in their footsteps. A big thank you also goes to the staff behind this rulemaking, including Barbara Esben, Garnet Hanley, Eli Johnson, Susanna Larson, John Lockwood, Jennifer Salhus, and Joel Tabenblatt from the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. Robert Aldrich, Diane Burstein, Daryl Cooper, Alejandro Rourke, and Susie Rosen Singleton from the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. Ron Rapazzi, Justin Risson, Dana Schaefer, and Jim Saliga from the Office of Engineering and Technology. William Huber, Michael Jansen, Doug Klein, and Anjali Singh from the Office of General Counsel. Patrick Brogan, Judith Dempsey, Douglas Galby, Kim Markuch, Catherine Matraves, Julia McHenry, Molly Schwartz, Emily Talaga, and Warren Wang from the Office of Economics and Analytics, and Michael Gusso, Joyce Ragsdale, and Shauna Wilkerson from the Office of Communications Business Opportunities. And with that, we will proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, please announce the next item on today's agenda.
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, item 4 on your agenda is titled Faster Pole Attachment Processes for Broadband Deployment and will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau. Trent Harkrader, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Harkrader, please proceed.
Good morning, thank you. The Wireline Competition Bureau is pleased to present for your consideration a report and order, declaratory ruling, and further notice of proposed rulemaking that would promote deployment of broadband infrastructure by making the pole attachment process faster, more transparent, and cost-effective. I'd like to thank the staff in the Bureau's Competition Policy Division and the Enforcement Bureau's Market Disputes Resolution Division for their collective work on this item, as well as our colleagues in the Offices of Communications Business Opportunities, General Counsel, and Economics and Analytics. Seated with me at the table from the Bureau are Adam Copeland, Deputy Bureau Chief, from the Competition Policy Division, Jody May, Chief, Michelle Burlove, Assistant Division Chief, and Ty Covey, Attorney Advisor. Also joining me at the table from the Enforcement Bureau is Lisa Boley. Lisa is an Attorney Advisor in the Market Disputes Resolution Division. Ty will now present the item.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. One of the keys to broadband deployment is ensuring access to the utility poles that support the wires and wireless equipment that carry broadband to American homes and businesses. Over the past several years, the Commission has taken steps to establish the rules of the road for discussions between utilities and telecommunications companies about the timing and costs of attaching broadband equipment to utility poles, with the backstop of a robust complaint process when parties cannot agree on the rates, terms, and conditions for pole attachments. This fourth report and order, declaratory ruling, and third further notice of proposed rulemaking, if adopted, would promote the deployment of broadband infrastructure by making the pole attachment process faster, more transparent, and cost-effective through adoption of rules allowing for faster resolution of pole attachment disputes, and by requiring utilities to provide attachers with more detailed information about the poles they plan to use as part of their broadband build-out. In addition, it would provide clarification regarding cost causation when a pole must be replaced for any reason other than the lack of capacity to support a new attachment. Finally, the Commission would seek comment on ways to further facilitate the approval process for attachment applications and make ready to enable quicker broadband deployment. The fourth report and order, if adopted, would establish an intra-agency rapid response team called the Rapid Broadband Assessment Team, or RBAT. This team would provide coordinated review and assessment of pole attachment disputes that allegedly impede or delay providers' ability to deploy new broadband facilities and recommend effective dispute resolution procedures. The order would also adopt specific criteria to guide the RBAT in deciding whether a complaint or a portion thereof should be included on the Commission's accelerated docket for expedited consideration. The fourth report and order also would require utilities to provide potential attachers, upon request, with the information contained in their most recent cyclical pole inspection reports or any intervening periodic pole inspection reports for the poles covered by an attachment application. Among other things, this would enable attachers to confirm whether any of the affected poles have been red tagged by the utility for replacement and the scheduled replacement date or time frame. The new rules also would require utilities to retain such cyclical and periodic pole inspection reports until such time as the utility completes a superseding cyclical pole inspection report covering the poles included in the attachment application in order to promptly respond to such requests. The declaratory ruling, if adopted, would clarify that for purposes of the Commission's pole replacement policies, a red-tagged pole is one that the utility has or should have identified as needing replacement for any reason other than the pole's lack of capacity to accommodate a new attachment, and provides additional examples for when a pole replacement is not necessitated solely as a result of a third party's attachment or modification request. These clarifications are intended to help attachers and utilities better understand what parties are responsible for pole replacement costs. The declaratory ruling also clarifies the obligation to share easement information and the applicable timelines for the processing of attachment requests for 3,000 or more poles in order to provide further clarification surrounding these issues. Finally, the further notice of proposed rulemaking, if adopted, would tentatively conclude that the Commission should adopt specific make-ready timelines for large pole attachment applications. It would also seek comment on whether the Commission should modify its self-help rules to enable prospective attachers to access poles more quickly, and on the impact of contractor availability when attachers seek to use their own contractors when conducting self-help or one-touch make-ready for surveys and make-ready work. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
Thanks so much to the team for the work on this. You know, look, I've had the opportunity, maybe the privilege, to live through some tough fights in my time serving up here. I mean, Title II, digital equity, major mergers, you know, issues that involve billions and billions of dollars. And I thought I'd seen tough fights in that environment before, except earlier this month when I famously, I didn't know it would be famous at the time, when I famously suggested that perhaps there's always a little bit more that we can do on pole attachments to help improve infrastructure builds. I learned for the first time what an actual dispute within the FCBA community looks like, and it very quickly changed the acronym from FCBA to WWF. It made it look, all those other fights that we'd had from Title II to digital equity to major mergers look like pillow fights in comparison.
What is going on?
I'll get there eventually. So all that is to say that I'm glad that the chair has found a path forward on this controversial, highly controversial, pole attachment proceeding in a way that I think strikes a good common sense landing spot. I know we made a couple other changes along the way as well, and it is clear that absolutely nobody is going to be happy at the end of this. But I do think, nonetheless, we made some common sense changes that I do hope accelerate rural infrastructure build. So thanks so much to the team for slogging through this one with us. It has my support.
All right. Commissioner Starks, what do you got?
Two things are true this morning. First is that pole attachments are essential. The second is that Commissioner Carr is famous in his own mind. Pole attachments are essential for broadband to be deployed nationwide to all Americans. Internet service providers need access to this vital infrastructure, especially these utility poles that enables fast, cost-efficient access to consumers. We've seen significant investments and deployment nationwide by ISPs to the tune of billions of dollars. And of course, Congress created the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment BEAD program and appropriated over $42 billion to expand high-speed internet access nationwide. With an influx of so much broadband funding, it's imperative that we ensure that attachers can quickly get attachments they need to consumers, that they have access to the broadband that they want. So on top of our efforts in the past to streamline the pole attachment process by adopting shot clocks and one-touch make-ready, today we take additional steps that balance the needs of both pole attachers and pole owners, always with consumers in mind. Specifically, I strongly support the creation of the Rapid Broadband Assessment Team As we heard, that should cut down on these disputes that threaten to impede broadband deployment. I also support clarification on the definition of a red tag pole to minimize these disputes going forward. I'm glad we take the opportunity in the declaratory ruling to clarify that for large attachment applications featuring more than 3,000 poles, or 5% of a utility poles in state, the first 3,000 designated poles are subject to our 45-day make-ready timeline. These are smart steps that will make a big difference. There are two topics that I additionally wanted to highlight that I think will be crucial if BEAD and the other broadband funding programs are to be successful. First, supporting the order's amendments to those one-touch make-ready rules requiring utilities to provide attachers with information they have prepared about the poles covered in an application. I want to emphasize that this does not mean that additional information that has traditionally been shared to facilitate pole attachment agreements should no longer be shared. This is a floor, not a ceiling, and all parties should engage in further information sharing to facilitate the expeditious deployment of broadband. I, for one, will be watching closely. Second, I want to quickly highlight that we seek further comment on two very important issues that will come into play as this BEAD funding is deployed. That is the large attachment applications and the self-help rules. I hope the Commission can move quickly on both of these topics in the further notice to eliminate, get out of the way as many outstanding questions as possible before this BEAD funding starts to flow. I look forward to engaging further to make sure our rules are appropriately balanced here for all interested parties. Thank you to the chair and for the team on this work here. I think pole attachments are one of those things that are absolutely essential for us to get right so we can move quickly together. Thank you.
Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. Language is always evolving at the Commission. Until today, when people heard pillow fight at the Commission, they thought that they were thinking of meeting attendees fighting to keep their heads off their pillows while suffering through my remarks. But the extensive record developed in this proceeding has shown that the pole attachment regime has failed to create the right rules and legal certainty to, in many cases, allow pole owners and pole attachers to reach fair deals in a timely fashion. There more remains to be done. This item is a great step forward towards addressing that. It clarifies the definition of a red tag pole, and also when replacement is not necessitated solely by a new attacher. It also adopts measures explicitly aimed at speeding up the dispute resolution process, which, in my mind, is the very best part. I urge the Chair and Bureau to make sure, as I'm sure they will, that the new RBAT clearly serves to resolve disputes more quickly instead of becoming a new layer of process and compliance. But I want to thank Wireline for their hard work on this, and it's great to have a path forward.
Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. Utility poles are the unsung heroes of broadband deployment, and yes, I said that. In addition to bringing communities electricity, cable, and telephone service, these often overlooked poles play a critical role in enabling efficient and widespread access to high-speed internet access service. In fact, this was brought home to me this week when the Gomez-Bergy household lost power for 17 hours due to a broken utility pole, thus losing our heat, our cable, and our access to the internet. So we've just seen the largest investment in broadband in our nation's history, and to ensure that this funding connects everyone in America to high-speed internet, we are going to need a lot of partners, but in particular, the utility companies. Today's action takes important steps to increase transparency and provide clarity to pole owners and attachers so that we are decreasing deployment times and reducing costs. Balancing the needs of both pole attachers and pole owners is crucial for a thriving and competitive telecommunications landscape, and this item strikes the right balance. Thank you to the chairwoman for her leadership, and to the Wireline Competition Bureau and to the Enforcement Bureau for your good work on this item.
Thank you, commissioners. In the bipartisan infrastructure law, Congress made a historic $65 billion commitment to ensure that everyone everywhere in the United States has access to broadband. Reaching 100% of us with high-speed service takes work, and the details matter. Networks need to be designed, rights of way need to be negotiated, and fiber optic cable needs to be attached to utility poles, which are often owned by local electric companies or telephone companies. Under Section 224 of the Communications Act, the FCC has authority to oversee the rates, terms, and conditions of these pole attachments. Though, under the law, states may elect to take on this task themselves, more than half the states have chosen to rely on the system the Commission has established under Section 224. Today, we update that system in order to ensure that the investment Congress made in the bipartisan infrastructure law is fully modern and meets this moment. First, we are creating a new process to resolve pole attachment disputes fast and effectively. If a company trying to build new broadband service gets into a disagreement with a pole owner, it can bog down deployment. So we're establishing a new interagency rapid response team, the Rapid Broadband Assessment Team, which we're calling RBAT, though Commissioner Carr seems to think we should call it the Rabbit.
The rabbit, move fast, yeah.
We'll talk. The goal is to speed dispute resolution, not to have a mascot. But second, we are increasing transparency by expanding access to pole inspection reports. This means pole owners will have to share reports with new attachers deploying broadband so they have information about where poles have been identified for replacement. Those building broadband really benefit from having these facts upfront and early. Third, we update our policies to make clear that when there are times when an attacher does not have to pay the full cost to replace an existing pole. Again, clarifying this can help with deployment. Finally, we ask for input on additional reforms to help speed processing applications for big projects like the kind we expect to see with the funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law. As Commissioner Gomez alluded to, pole attachments do not always receive the attention they deserve. They are not the most glamorous part of broadband deployment, but they are an absolutely essential part of our effort to ensure that high-speed service reaches everyone, everywhere in this country. Our action today puts them in the spotlight and readies them for the real work that will follow, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and our effort to close this nation's digital divide. So I want to thank the staff who worked on this effort, including Michelle Burlove, Adam Copeland, Ty Covey, Trent Harkrader, Julie May, Kiara Ortiz, and Michael Ray from the Wireline Competition Bureau, Lisa Boley, Leon Egal, Pamela Gallant, Lisa Griffin, Rosemary McGinney, Lisa Sachs, and Adam Soups from the Enforcement Bureau, Richard Mallon, Anjali Singh, Derek Yeo, and Shin Yu from the Office of General Counsel, Eric Ralph from the Office of Economics and Analytics, and Jocelyn James from the Office of Communications, Business Opportunities. And with that, we will have a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, can you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, item 5 on your agenda is titled Improving the Rural Health Care Program and will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau. Once again, Trent Harkrader, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Harkrader, when you're ready, go ahead and proceed.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. The Wireline Competition Bureau is pleased to present for your consideration an item that would continue the Commission's effort to improve its Universal Service Rural Health Care Program. This third report in order, if adopted, would facilitate participation in the program by rural healthcare providers and enhance program efficiency and effectiveness. I'd like to thank the Bureau team and our colleagues in the Office of General Counsel and the Office of Economics and Analytics for their hard work on this item. Seated at the table with me are Allison Baker, Jody Griffin, Brian Boyle, and Phil Bonomo. Phil is an Assistant Division Chief in the Wireline Competition Bureau's Telecommunications Access Policy Division, and will present the item.
Thank you, Trent, and good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. Today's item, if adopted, would make 5 improvements to the Rural Health Care Program aimed at enabling program participation and improving program administration, and a 6th measure that would free up for other uses funding commitments that have not yet been invoiced. The first improvement would revise program rules to permit conditional eligibility for healthcare providers that expect to be eligible in the near future. This measure would allow these healthcare providers to initiate the competitive bidding process and to request funding prior to receiving formal approval of eligibility, thereby ensuring healthcare providers are able to participate in the program for the funding year for which they expect to receive formal approval. No healthcare provider would receive a funding commitment until all eligibility requirements are met. Second, the item would revise program rules to align the Service Provider Identification Number, or SPIN, change deadline with the invoice deadline. This measure would reduce burdens on program applicants by providing them with more time to request a SPIN change, thereby reducing the often reoccurring need to seek a waiver of the SPIN change deadline. Third, the item would simplify the telecommunication program's urban rate rules by removing the rarely invoked standard urban distance provision used to calculate urban rates. Eliminating this provision would make the process for determining urban rates clearer, thereby reducing burdens on applicants. Fourth, the item would revise program rules by permitting healthcare providers to request changes to the dates for their evergreen contracts, which are contracts for which healthcare providers are exempt from the competitive bidding requirement for the term of the contract. This improvement would provide healthcare providers with the full benefit of evergreen contract designation for multi-year contracts by aligning the evergreen contract period with the actual dates of service contained in the evergreen contract. This improvement would also reduce the need for healthcare providers to seek relief. The fifth improvement would establish a single eligibility determination form for both the Telecommunications Program and Healthcare Connect Fund program that is required to be filed only once. This measure would reduce burdens on telecommunications program applicants, who currently are required to seek eligibility approval every time they initiate the competitive bidding process. Finally, the item would establish a deadline of July the 1st, 2024 for telecommunication program participants to submit invoices for commitments received for funding year 2019 and earlier, a period during which there was no telecommunications program invoice deadline. After that date, funding commitments not invoiced would be deobligated. This measure would free up for other uses up to $22.2 million in commitments not yet invoiced. The Wireline Competition Bureau recommends adoption of this item, and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
Thanks so much to the team for the hard, good work on this item. I appreciate it. It has my support. Thanks.
Commissioner Starks.
Yes, thank you. I deeply appreciate the hard work from the team. One of my very first trips as a commissioner was to Pahrump, Nevada, in the Amargosa Valley, where I visited a number of small rural hospitals that were deeply involved with our rural healthcare problem. One of my my most recent trips was to Alaska, where I also visited a number of small rural hospitals that rely heavily on this program. So glad to see that it will be working better, working more efficient with the changes that we make here today. Has my support.
Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. I'm happy to support this item, making various thoughtful administrative changes that should improve the operation of the rural health care program. And I want to thank Wireline for your really tenacious and careful work to get the details right. Much appreciated.
Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. The past few years have emphasized the importance of healthcare, and in particular access to to telehealth, As we continue to navigate the evolving landscape of healthcare, it's imperative to ensure that all communities have access to essential services. The Rural Healthcare Program plays a pivotal role in bridging this gap, helping connect healthcare providers to broadband and telecommunications services necessary for the provision of healthcare. Today, we build upon changes to the Rural Healthcare Program that the Commission has made over the past 5 years. We've taken a look at what works and where we can make the program easier for healthcare providers to participate, streamline processes, and maximize limited universal service funds and make the program more efficient. I thank the staff of the Wireline Competition Bureau for their work on this well-thought-out item.
Thank you, Commissioners. The FCC has been supporting telemedicine way before it was trendy. For more than 25 years, the agency's rural health care program has been a force for good helping sustain telehealth services in some of the hardest to reach places in this country. But post-pandemic telemedicine, well, it's moved into the medical mainstream. Virtual appointments, remote monitoring, and support for advanced medical imaging are now familiar to patients in rural America, urban America, and everything in between. It has been incredible to see such extraordinary change in healthcare and technology. What does not change, however, is that this agency needs to update its rural healthcare program to ensure it serves the places that need support with modern telehealth technology. That is why today we are taking these steps to simplify our process, speed access to the program for new providers, and free up millions of dollars of unused program funding. These changes are vital. After all, there are forces out there: insurance limitations, licensing restrictions, resistance to Medicaid expansion, and court cases that can make it a whole lot harder for patients to access health care. We're going to do all we can at this agency to ensure that despite these challenges, this program, like it has for more than a quarter of a century, continues to help provide first-class care in rural communities across the country. Thank you to the staff who worked on this, including Allison Baker, Phil Bonomo, Brian Boyle, Cheryl Callahan, Callie Coker, Adam Copeland, Ross Fisher, Jody Griffin, Trent Harkrader, Clint Heifel, Sonam James, Avis Mitchell, Kiara Ortiz, and Helen Zhang of the Wireline Competition Bureau, Marcus Mayer, Rick Mallon, Derek Yu, and Shin Yu of the Office of General Counsel, and Eugene Kiselev, Eric Ralph, and Shane Taylor from the Office of Economics and Analytics. And with that, we will have a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr?
Approve.
Commissioner Starks?
Approve.
Commissioner Symington?
Approve.
Commissioner Gomez?
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with oratorial privileges as requested. All right, Madam Secretary, please announce the next item on today's agenda.
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, the sixth and final item on your agenda is titled Data Breach Notification Rules and will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau. Once again, Trent Harkrader, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
All right. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Harkrader, the Bureau's been busy. Please proceed.
We have. Good morning. Is it still morning? Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. Again, the Wireline Competition Bureau is pleased to present for your consideration a report and order on the Commission's data breach notification rules. This item, if adopted, would update the Commission's rules to ensure that providers of telecommunications and interconnected voice over Internet protocol services and providers of telecommunications relay services, or TRS, adequately safeguard sensitive customer information and enable customers to protect themselves in the event that their data is compromised. I'd like to thank the Bureau team for their hard work on this item, as well as our colleagues in the Consumer and Governmental Affairs, Enforcement, Public Safety and Homeland Security, and Wireless Telecommunications Bureaus, as well as the Offices of Communications Business Opportunities, Economics and Analytics, and the General Counsel for their thoughtful review and input. Joining me at the table from the Bureau are Adam Copeland, Deputy Bureau Chief, Jody May, Chief of the Competition Policy Division, Zach Ross, Assistant Division Chief, and Kimia Nexarest, Attorney Advisor. Kimia will present the item.
Thank you, Trent, and good morning or good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. In 1998, in an effort to ensure that telecommunications carriers protect the confidentiality of customer information that they receive or have access to by virtue of their provision of a telecommunications service, the Commission adopted its first restrictions on carriers' use and disclosure of customer proprietary network information, or CPNI, as well as a framework to require carriers to take effective steps to protect CPNI. The Commission amended its rules in 2007 to require carriers to notify law enforcement and customers of security breaches involving CPNI. And in 2013, the Commission adopted similar rules to protect the CPNI of TRS users. However, in the 16 years since the data breach rules were adopted, the landscape has changed. Breaches of customer information have increased in scale, sophistication, and severity. In response, the Commission adopted a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking in December of last year, seeking comment on proposed updates to ensure that our rules adequately safeguard sensitive customer information. This report and order, if adopted, would implement several of those proposals to modernize the Commission's data breach requirements. Because consumers may be harmed by the improper use or disclosure of sensitive customer data other than CP&I, if adopted, the report and order would first expand the scope of the Commission's breach notification rules to cover certain categories of personally identifiable information, or PII, that carriers hold with respect to their customers. Second, it would expand the definition of breach to include inadvertent access, use, or disclosure of customer information, except where such information is acquired in good faith by an employee or agent of a carrier and is not improperly or further disclosed. Third, the report and order would require carriers to notify the Commission, in addition to the United States Secret Service and Federal Bureau of Investigations, when a breach has occurred. Fourth, in order to limit the potential burdens on carriers and consumers from notifications that are unlikely to require protective action, the report and order would eliminate the requirement that carriers notify customers of a breach in cases where a carrier can reasonably determine that no harm to customers is reasonably likely to occur as a result of the breach, or where the breach solely involves encrypted data and the carrier has definitive evidence that the encryption key was not also accessed, used, or disclosed. Fifth, to further support consumers' ability to act quickly to protect themselves following a breach for which there is a risk of harm, the report and order would eliminate the mandatory 7-business-day waiting period between federal agency notification and customer notification. Instead, it would require carriers to notify customers of breaches of covered data without unreasonable delay after notification to federal agencies, and in no case more than 30 days following reasonable determination of a breach, unless a delay is requested by law enforcement. Finally, the report and order would adopt equivalent requirements for TRS providers. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
In 2016, the FCC adopted a data breach notification rule in a 3-2 decision. In 2017, the House, the Senate, and the President all came together and nullified that rule by passing a joint resolution of disapproval under the Congressional Review Act. It was a rare rebuke of an agency action. Indeed, in the 27 years since Congress enacted the CRA, the law has only been used on 20 occasions. It's strong medicine, too. When a president signs a CRA into law, it not only prohibits an agency from readopting the relevant rule, it also prohibits the agency from enacting a substantially similar rule in the future without specific legislative authorization from Congress. In other words, when an agency earns the distinction of having one of its rules nullified through the CRA, the legislative branch and the executive branch are joining together to take back the agency's rulemaking authority in the relevant area. And going forward, future regulation, if any, must come from Congress itself. As a constitutional matter, administrative agencies have an obligation to abide by these decisions. Yet today, the Commission makes no serious attempt to explain how the data breach rule we adopt today is not the same or substantially similar to the one nullified by the House, by the Senate, and by the President. This plainly violates the law. The FCC's only real defense is one that reads the CRA out of the United States Code altogether. The order notes that the 2016 FCC decision adopted several rules, all of which were nullified by the 2017 CRA. But in the order's view, the CRA doesn't prohibit the FCC from putting any one of those rules, or even some combination of them, back in place, provided the FCC doesn't put back in place all of the 2016 rules in the same decisional document. Now, this creates an exception that swallows the CRA whole. Indeed, if the FCC's theory were correct, then agencies could insulate any one of their rules from the CRA, no matter how strongly the House, the Senate, and the President felt about the rule, simply by packaging that one rule together with several others and putting them in the same decisional document. Then under the FCC's theory, the agency could always put that original rule back in place, CRA notwithstanding, provided it didn't reenact all of those other rules at the same time. And this is a sweeping theory. It far exceeds the limits that the legislative branch and the executive branch have placed on agency decision-making. Indeed, in a letter to the FCC just this week, leaders in the Senate warned that the Commission's interpretation, quote, would eviscerate the CRA. But the FCC's decision today violates more than the CRA. It also violates the APA. In the notice of proposed rulemaking that launched this proceeding, the Commission expressly stated, in negotiated language, that the agency was not seeking comment on putting back in place or otherwise issuing a new rule that was the same or substantially similar to the one disapproved by Congress in the 2017 CRA. Yet that's exactly what the FCC chooses to do today with this data breach rule. Thus, while some have theorized that any FCC violation of the CRA itself is not reviewable by the courts, I think a dubious claim, any violation of the APA by the FCC is always reviewable. The order's problems only compound from there. Even if the CRA never passed, the FCC's decision would exceed the Commission's authority. For instance, instead of limiting the FCC's rule to the set of CP&I over which the agency plainly has jurisdiction, the order purports to expand the Commission's CP&I framework to an expansive set of PII, or personally identifiable information, even though Congress never gave us authority to impose that type of regulation on PII, and even though the Commission never sought comment on doing so. In the end, the agency could have proceeded with a set of rules based on the NPRM that would have made progress on data breaches while staying within the clear bounds that Congress set on agency action. However, I can't support this expansive interpretation of the Commission's authority, especially in light of the clear constraints imposed in 2017 through the CRA process. And for that, I will be dissenting. Thanks.
Commissioner Starks.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Unfortunately, we've all been there. You check your mail only to find a letter from a service provider announcing that your sensitive information has been leaked as part of a larger, in some instances, a mass data breach. And if it seems like these notifications and announcements are happening more frequently, you're right. According to a recent report, data breaches impacting U.S. organizations are already at an all-time high. There were more breaches in the first 3 quarters of 2023 than in any prior year. Another report states that the United States saw 1,800 data breaches in 2022, with 422 million records exposed and 298 million Americans impacted. So this matters. Sensitive data breaches include the type of information that bad actors can exploit for identity theft, financial fraud, crimes, scams, placing consumers at risk in a multitude of ways. Congress recognized this too. Section 222 of the Communications Act gives us clear authority and carriers a duty to protect the confidentiality of proprietary information of and relating to consumers and others. We first adopted our data breach rules 16 years ago, but in the intervening years, it has shown us that our data breach rules are badly in need of a refresh. The amount of data service providers now collect and retain has greatly expanded the risk profile for consumers and for carriers, as does the sophistication of bad actors who are constantly trying to access that data. So I'm glad that we update our rules today in response to the reality that we need to do more to both protect sensitive consumer data and notify consumers and authorities when a data breach occurs. One overdue change is properly expanding the definition of breach beyond just the intentional access, use, or disclosure of covered data. Many breaches are inadvertent, but nonetheless harmful, and the impact on consumers when their data is disclosed does not turn on the question of intent. At the same time, yet, we realize that breach fatigue is also very real. And so to avoid this risk, the order properly adopts a harm-based notification trigger and an affected consumer trigger threshold that limits the consumer reporting requirements and balances the need for notice with the burden on consumers if harm is unlikely. We should continue, of course, to work with our agency partners to coordinate filing obligations across government over time, including as the Cybersecurity and Information Security Agency works on their cybersecurity incident reporting rulemaking. I also agree with the need for providers to encrypt their data, especially sensitive data. I can't emphasize enough that providers should be encrypting data that they hold as a basic best practice. And so while we don't require encryption in this item, we do adopt encryption as a safe harbor, recognizing it as a critical defense against data breaches and incentivizing providers to embrace it. I thank the chair as well for working with me on edits that I suggested to strike the right balance in defining PII data that needs to be protected and the level of harm that triggers reporting obligations. Data breaches will continue to be something that is a reality of our world, but by notifying consumers and working here in the government, we can take steps to mitigate these harms. Thank you to the chair for her leadership here. Thank you to the team for your hard work on what was a very complex item here. It has my support. Thank you.
Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. My primary objection to the order we adopt today is not that it's necessarily bad policy. I might have a few comments about clarity, specificity, targeting, but that would be captious because the thrust of what I want to talk about today is the effort to nullify the 2017 Congressional Review Act resolution that overturned the 2016 privacy order, which this order re-implements various provisions of. The CRA prohibits an agency from adopting a rule that is, quote, substantially the same, unquote, as a previous rule that was overturned by a CRA resolution. A wooden reading of the statute that an order does not reissue, quote, substantially the same, unquote, rule unless the individual order has almost all of the same provisions of the overturned rule, well, that would turn the CRA's prohibition into a dead letter. An agency seeking to circumvent a previous CRA resolution could just split the regulation into several orders and pass it piecemeal. To give the CRA meaningful effect, we must look at not just the content of any one order, but the totality of related orders adopted subsequent to a CRA resolution. Adopting the 2016 privacy order in piecemeal is exactly what the Commission is doing over time. Today we adopt a breach notification rule for Title II providers, which right now means mostly telephone companies, but 2 months ago, this Commission began the process of reclassifying broadband as a Title II service, which when complete will subject broadband providers to these new rules as, well, just as the 2016 order did. Last month, we adopted data security, customer authentication, employee training, and other requirements that mirror provisions of the 2016 order. And I frankly have no doubt that this Commission will, if given the chance, adopt even more aspects of the 2016 order. In a further similarity, the order we adopt today dramatically expands the kind of data that the FCC has jurisdiction over, exactly like the 2016 privacy order. And it relies on the same dubious legal theory as the 2016 privacy order. Traditionally, the FCC's privacy authority has been limited to customer proprietary network information, a term of art defined and used in Section 222's grants of authority. CPNI is limited to quantity, technical configuration, type, destination, location, and amount of use of a telecommunications service, or substantially the things that the provider needs to know about you in order to physically deliver service to your device and bill appropriately, etc. The majority is not satisfied with jurisdiction over only this data and instead asserts jurisdiction over all personally identifiable information, or PII. To justify that, it relies on the omission of the word network from the introductory sentence at section 222A. But this interpretation is inconsistent with decades of FCC interpretation and practice. The best interpretation of section 222A is, in my view, not that it is an independent source of authority, but a high-level summary of the more specific provisions that follow it. With this order today, has the Commission in fact reissued, quote, substantially the same, unquote, rule as the 2016 privacy order? It's quite possible. I'm sure that this item is at least a major step towards doing that, which I cannot support, therefore I must dissent. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Gomez.
Nearly a decade ago, a unanimous Supreme Court noted that modern cell phones are not just another technological convenience. With all they contain and all they may reveal, they hold for many Americans the privacies of life. Since 2014, the importance of mobile phones in our daily lives has only increased, and the data at risk has only become more sensitive. As consumers rely more heavily on cell phones for daily activities, consumers expect that telecommunications providers will safeguard their sensitive data and their networks. So it is timely that we take a look at the Commission's existing data breach notification rules and modernize them where appropriate, aligning with the evolving landscape of cybersecurity threats. I emphasize where appropriate. We must ensure that our updates are intentional and, more importantly, that they benefit consumers. To that extent, I am grateful to the stakeholders who have come in on this item and the discussions we've had on modernizing the data breach rules. We've made progress to ensure that these updates strike the balance between protecting consumers and refraining from imposing unnecessary burdens on providers. So I thank the chairwoman for taking my suggestions to reduce the burdens on providers while also maintaining strong safeguards to protect consumers. To the Wireline Competition Bureau and the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, thank you for your patience in responding to my many questions, and thank you for your tireless work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioners. It has been 16 years since the Federal Communications Commission last updated its policies to protect consumers from data breaches. 16 years. To be clear, that was before the iPhone was introduced. There was no smartphones, there was no app store, there were no blue and green bubbles for texts. It was a long time ago. In the intervening years, a lot has changed about when, where, and how we use our phones and what data our providers collect about us when we do. But not the FCC's data breach rules. They remain stuck in the analog age. Today, we fix this problem. We update our policies to protect consumers from digital age data breaches. We make clear that under the Communications Act, carriers have a duty to protect the privacy and security of consumer data. First, we modernize our data breach rules to make clear they include all personally identifiable information. In the past, our rules have only prohibited the disclosure of information about who we call and when. But consumers absolutely deserve to know if their carrier has disclosed their social security number, or financial data, or other sensitive information that can put them in harm's way. We fix that today, and it's overdue. Second, we modernize our data breach rules to make clear that they cover intentional and inadvertent disclosure of customer information. Consumers deserve protection regardless of whether the release of their personally identifiable information was intentional or accidental. Either way, they could find themselves in trouble, so our rules need to address both. Third, we modernize our standards for notification. That means in the event of a data breach, your carrier has to tell the FCC and tell you in a timely way just what happened and what personal information of yours might be at risk. Our old rules required carriers to wait 7 business days before telling consumers that major breaches had taken place. There is no reason why consumers should have to wait that long before learning that their personal information has been stolen or misused. Finally, we update reporting requirements associated with data breaches, and we make clear our policies apply to telecommunications relay service providers so that those with disabilities get the same protections as everyone else. These are necessary updates. Find a consumer with a phone anywhere, and they would tell you every one of these changes makes sense. What makes no sense is leaving our policies stuck in the analog era. Our phones now know so much about where we go and who we are. We need rules on the books to make sure our carriers keep our information safe and cyber secure. I want to thank the Commission's Privacy and Data Protection Task Force for their input into this effort and work to update our privacy and security policies across the board. I also want to note that with the help of the task force, for the first time ever, the FCC has signed memoranda of understanding with attorneys general from Pennsylvania, Illinois, Connecticut, and New York, who are committing to work with us on privacy, data protection, and cybersecurity enforcement matters. A big thank you also goes to our colleagues at the United States Secret Service and Federal Bureau of Investigation for their input and support on our effort today. Let me also commend staff at the agency for their work, including Callie Kokol, Adam Copeland, Trent Harkrader, Melissa Kirkle, Jody May, Kimia Nexaresh, Zach Ross, Mason Sherfa, and John Viklowski from the Wireline Competition Bureau, Robert Aldrich, Diane Burstein, Aaron Garza, Elliot Greenwald, Ike Ofabike, Alejandro Roark, Michael Scott, and Mark Stone from the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, John Blumenshine, Justin Kane, Michael Connolly, Deborah Jordan, Nicole McGinnis, Erica Olson, Austin Randazzo, and Chris Smeek from the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, Hunter Deely, Loyan Eagle, Peter Hyun, Ryan McDonald, Victoria Randazzo, Philip Rosario, Christy Thompson, and Shanna Yates from the Enforcement Bureau, Barbara Espin, Garnet Hanley, and John Lockwood from the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, Michael Jansen, Douglas Klein, Marcus Mayer, Richard Mallon, Roy Sherlock, Anjali Singh, and Elliot Tarloff from the Office of General Counsel, Mark Azik, Eugene Kiselev, Julia McHenry, and Stephen Rosenberg from the Office of Economics and Analytics, and Joy Ragsdale and Shauna Wilkerson from the Office of Communications Business Opportunities. We will proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr?
Dissent.
Commissioner Starks?
Approve.
Commissioner Symington?
Dissent.
Commissioner Gomez?
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. All right. Would any of my colleagues like to make announcements at this time? Commissioner Carr?
I do have one. Unfortunately, from my perspective, my chief of staff, Ben Arden, who is now 4 years into a 4-month-long detail, is going to be returning back to the Bureau. You know, Ben effectively gave me a paraphrase of The Princess Bride at the end of every day. Ben would walk in, he would say, "Good work, sleep well. In the morning, I'm most likely to return to the Bureau." And yet every day we somehow convinced him to stick it out on the 8th and then the 10th floor. But Ben has been obviously invaluable to me and to my office for 4 years. Just imagine what my tweeting would look like if Ben had not been in my office to jump on many a draft tweet that actually didn't make it out the door. Ben obviously is an amazing father of 3 young kids, 3 boys that are basically the same age as my 3 boys. I think they're really good kids because when I talk on the phone, it's my kids that are yelling a lot more in the background than his kids are yelling in the background. I just think that's a great sign of he's doing something really well on the home front. And this move back to Bureau will open up even more opportunities to spend less time on the phone with me, as enjoyable as that is, and more time with those well-behaved kids and his wonderful wife. So we wish Ben all the luck. Very mixed emotions for me as we have Ben do that. But look, at the end of the day, thankfully Ben is staying in the building, so we'll get to continue to benefit from all of his great public service and his work. Ben actually, joined the FCC for the first time back in 2010 after working at the law firm of William Mullins before that, and he had an almost continuous run at the FCC except for a year or so where he went to Rwanda, but he came back to us eventually, graduated from Arizona State undergrad, law at Indiana, where he was the editor of the Federal Communications Law Journal. But again, can't express enough my thanks and appreciation to Ben for this past 4 years. It's been quite a fun run. And with that, there is an absence that obviously cannot be filled by anyone necessarily, but at least we have to try to pass along the title. And I'm grateful that Greg Watson has agreed to step up and serve as the Chief of Staff for the office. Greg is a really, really talented advisor. Obviously, he's sort of the Swiss Army knife of advisors for me. He doesn't have a law degree, but he makes up for it in every other way possible. He's got a lot of experience both in the legislative branch and in the executive branch. He worked as an advisor to the CTO in the White House Office of Science, Technology, Policy. He worked there on the American Broadband Initiative and actually helped free up a few megahertz of spectrum when he was there, which was pretty good. It's not easy from what I could tell. Before that, he was over on the House, worked for Leader Scalise, and then on House Energy and Commerce, so he's got great perspective from the Hill. And so obviously he's been an invaluable member of the team as well for me since January of 21, so almost 3 years now. So congrats on that. But net, it is a sad day in the Carr office, and just again want to express my deep thanks and appreciation to my friend Ben for his public service for me and continued service at the agency. So thanks.
All right. We look forward to welcoming Ben back into the Bureau. Congratulations, Greg. And Commissioner Starks, do you have any announcements today?
I do. First of all, thank you, Ben, for all of your work. I know my team has deeply valued the collaboration and the great working relationship we've had. We look forward to welcoming you back and look forward to continue to work with you, Greg. I also have a departure in my office. My legal advisor, Morgan Bodinarian, has left. Thankfully, she's not going very far. She has accepted a position as policy director and counsel to the Congressional Black Caucus. So she is working for my good friend, CBC Chairman Steve Horsford, and she will continue, no doubt, to provide invaluable counsel and continue her service. I have personally valued what she has done. She has served in a very close position of trust with me. She has worked on digital equity, digital discrimination. She has taken the lead on the Martha Wright Reed Act and helping effectuate prison phone justice. She had the very rare honor of working with Congressman Butterfield on the Safe Connection Act, which was a passion project of his, and she got to see it through here, and we just voted on that item just a couple of months ago, and so she was deeply knowledgeable and able to bring expertise and her talent to my office. I am excited for her to continue to grow in her career with this new role. I look forward, as always, to cheering her on. I'm sure she's watching. I know she's watching here. And so she went to Elon University for undergraduate. I had the benefit of going to a GW law school event where she attended, and it was like being with the mayor. She just knew everybody there at GW, being a fairly recent grad. And so I could not be more proud of you, Morgan, and look forward to, of course, stay tuned on who's going to ultimately get that role next here. But thank you so much for your hard work, Morgan.
All right. Any announcements, Commissioner Symington?
None at this time, thank you.
Commissioner Gomez?
I just want to wish everyone a very happy holiday.
Yeah. All right. I got a lot, so get comfortable. I want to start by acknowledging the passing of a member of the FCC family. Eric Chamberlain passed away on December 2nd. He joined the commission in 2015 and worked in the FCC's Gettysburg office for nearly 9 years as an industry analyst in the broadband division of the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. He worked outside of the spotlight, but he actually worked on one of the agency's most essential functions, and that is the licensing of radio frequencies. He reviewed and processed thousands of license applications across all kinds of wireless services. He literally kept the wireless world working. He's survived by his high school sweetheart and wife of 15 years, Tina Chamberlain, and his 2 daughters, and he's going to be remembered as a cherished colleague and a friend to many people at the agency. Next, I have, well, think of it as the top 10 retirements to announce. It's the end of the year. It is retirement season. So let me acknowledge Jeff Tobias, who served for decades as a senior attorney in the mobility division of the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. He focused on policy and rulemaking projects to fuel private wireless networks and transactions, ensuring that radio spectrum and technologies are available for maritime and aviation use. He was widely known among our federal partners for the depth of his knowledge on these matters, and he was also really well known among industry stakeholders as an authority on private radio matters, whether they involved land, sea, or air. We're thankful for Jeff's service, and we wish him the best in retirement. Steve Jones is retiring after 26 years of federal service. Steve joined our Office of Engineering Technology Laboratory in 2001 and devoted his engineering career at the agency to developing measurement procedures and practices for our test laboratories to demonstrate that radio frequency devices comply with FCC rules. That's a big deal. Steve served as the FCC representative to the American National Standards Committee over the past decade, and we thank Steve for his service. Stanley Lyles is retiring with 22 years of federal government service. Stanley was involved in the Office of Engineering and Technology's testing of dynamic frequency selection capabilities since its very inception, and he's collaborated closely with access point manufacturers to help deploy DFS-capable equipment. Stanley was also instrumental in the lab's equipment authorization audit process, and he was our go-to person when it came to addressing knowledge database inquiries at the lab. We thank Stanley for his service. Penny Blaylock is retiring after a multi-decade career at the FCC. Penny is one of those hidden gems that keep the commission running and on track. During her long career, she served primarily as an assistant to the chiefs of the Media Bureau, as well as its predecessor, the Mass Media Bureau, keeping them organized, informed, and on schedule. We're going to miss Penny's cheerfulness and her thorough administrative skills, and like with all others, we wish her well in retirement. Gloria Conway is retiring after 41 years of government service, and 38 of those were at this agency. She joined the FCC, and it's really a history lesson in the agency because she started as a secretary in what was then the Mass Media Bureau, and then she was promoted to industry analyst in what was then the Cable Bureau, but she's entering her tenure in what we now call the Media Bureau after working for many years on cable licensing matters. We're going to miss Gloria's expertise in this area, and we wish her only good things going forward. And with 27 years of government service, Media Bureau Director of Media Relations Janice Wise is retiring. Janice actually began her FCC career in the office of Commissioner Susan Ness in 1996. And since then, she served in several roles, including in the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, Enforcement Bureau, and Media Bureau. And she's one of those people who wrote many of our consumer guides and is most proud of one she worked on called Calling Home, which was a guide that was distributed to armed services bases throughout the world to help service members identify how to make cost-effective calls back home to their loved ones in the U.S. She later transitioned to media relations work, including a memorable first day on the job as press spokesman for the Enforcement Bureau, and it was the day after the Super Bowl's wardrobe malfunction. So we are going to miss her wit and her can-do attitude, no matter what came before her. Also, and I see him here today, Elliot Greenwald is one of the most dedicated advocates for accessibility that has worked in these halls. He has invested decades of work to elevate disability rights, including some time that he spent doing pro bono work for TDI. He started as an attorney advisor with what was then the FCC's Common Carrier Bureau in 1977. He left the agency in 1981 to work with law firms on wireless issues. But in 2011, Elliot returned home to the FCC as a deputy chief in the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau's Disabilities Rights Office. And as deputy chief for disability rights, Elliot's primary responsibility was to oversee all rulemaking proceedings related to accessibility. But he was especially knowledgeable with telecommunications relay services. In fact, his work has been a big part of ensuring effective and seamless relay services for millions of people in this country, as required by the Americans with Disabilities Act. That is an incredible record, and we thank him for his service. Gail Radley Teicher began working in the FCC's Common Carrier Bureau in 1995. She previously served at the State Department Office of Legal Advisor. She also spent some time working at a federal banking agency. Between service at the State Department and the FCC, she co-authored a book on U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, Twin Pillars to Desert Storm, America's Flawed Vision in the Middle East. And it was on the New York Times Most Notable Books of 1993. So we're going to assume that was a career highlight, but the highlights of her career at the FCC included some other big things. She served as the FCC Defense Commissioner Representative for the Y2K National Coordinating Center, if you can remember that. She also worked on public safety issues following the 9/11 terror attacks, on our broadband data collection and mapping, the Affordable Connectivity Program, the Emergency Connectivity Fund, broadband labeling, and Lifeline program. Gail said in retirement she is going to lean into storytelling and writing, so we are all going to be looking for her next book. And retirement number 9 is Larry Shields, who's been a valuable and steadfast FCC colleague for over 25 years. After a decorated career of over 13 years in the Army, where he reached the rank of major, Larry joined the FCC in 1998 as a management analyst in the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau's Auctions and Industry Analysis Division. He helped provide administrative and personnel support for the FCC's just then growing auctions program. He moved to the office of the managing director in 2003, where he's been an HR professional and leader for over 20 years. In fact, he brought on board hundreds of staff, probably many of you who are sitting here today. On top of that, Larry helped stand up the new Office of Economics and Analytics. We thank him for his service and wish him the best in retirement. All right, last but not least, retirement number 10 is Mary Kay Mitchell. After 24 years of service to the federal government, Mary Kay Mitchell will be retiring at the end of this month. Her name might be familiar because she has been a vital part of the FCC's management team for more than 16 years. She's what we call a space management specialist, and then she rose to lead our administrative operations group. She left us for a few years to go to the FTC with a major office renovation and relocation, but you know what? We hired her back here with the greatest challenge of her career, and that was moving us all to this building. It's true, none of us would be here today without Mary Kay. In fact, she was responsible for more than just building this building. She helped secure leases for FCC locations around the country, built our auction war rooms, and helped develop our sensitive compartment information facilities. She also helped with the launch of our first ever child care center. Okay, that is a lot, and my voice is going. But I want to thank you, Mary Kay, for the big challenges. And Madam Secretary, will you announce the next date for the Commission's monthly agenda meeting?
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Thursday, January 25th, 2024.
Until then, we stand adjourned.
Good afternoon, everyone. If folks could take outside conversations to the hallway, that'd be greatly appreciated. We'll be getting started with the Chairwoman's post-open meeting press conference, our last one of the year. And with that, I will introduce Chairwoman Rosenworcel. She'll take a few questions.
Thank you, Paloma. Matt, go right ahead.
Please turn on your microphone.
Sorry. Matt Danneman, Communications Daily. Can you tell us when you expect the 2018 QR to be voted? When do you expect the 22 QR to be circulated? Do you have any input on that?
I can respond to the first. We circulated it to my colleagues with respect to the 2018 review several weeks ago. It is before them right now. I'm hopeful that we'll have it voted shortly.
Gotcha. And then my other question, specifically not asking about the SpaceX RDOF decision, but broadly from more of a policy standpoint, what role do you see satellite broadband playing in federal digital divide programs in the near future, in coming years, in coming months?
To reach 100% of us, we're going to need to embrace all kinds of technologies. What was before us in the Rural Digital Opportunities Program, though, is something different. It is a question of whether or not you met the program's requirements, and if you don't meet the program's requirements, you are not going to be allocated those funds. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chairwoman. I think that is everything we have programmed for today. So have a wonderful rest of your year and see you in 2024.
Yeah, if he comes down, yeah.
Yeah, Jeff, we might, if Carr comes down, we hold it up. Can we hold it up for a minute? Okay. I don't know if he's coming or not. We don't know. We're not doing the bureau press conference. What's that? No, we're not. Yeah, we're not doing a bureau one this time because this guy didn't have any questions for me.
Okay. Happy to take questions.
Commissioner, I appreciate it very much. For the record, Matt Daneman, Communications Daily. I guess my question is, today's meeting, we saw dissents by you and Commissioner Symington on a pair of items. You dissented on the SpaceX RDOF item earlier this week. This coming from an FCC that, when it had been a four-member FCC, there had been a lot more unanimity. What's changed? How much is this a reflection of you and Commissioner Symington feeling more free, and how much is this of different items coming up?
Look, I think one thing that's changed pretty directly over the last couple of months is that President Biden has weighed in, and the Biden administration, much more directly in various FCC proceedings. You mentioned Starlink. This is one where last year, President Biden stood at a podium at the White House and said that Elon Musk was worth being investigated. When a reporter asked him how, the president looked down and says there's lots of ways. And if you look across the federal government right now, there are an almost unlimited number of agencies that are taking action against Elon Musk. Even the Fish and Wildlife Services, for apparently someone found a blue land crab that was charred after a SpaceX launch. And so the Fish and Wildlife Service launched an investigation. And I think when you look at the FCC's Starlink decision, from my perspective, it's not one that really makes sense when viewed through the lens of the law or the facts or policy. Because at the end of the day, if the goal of the RDOF proceeding is to ensure that rural America gets high-speed internet service in an affordable way, that we're good stewards of the taxpayer dollars, then the value we got from the nearly $1 billion award that we issued to Elon Musk in 2020 was delivery on that. Now we've completely eliminated that commitment to bring high-speed service to all those Americans that we secured through that $1 billion commitment, and we replace it with nothing. And if you just do some back-of-the-envelope math and you take a look and see what it's going to cost the federal government to get someone else to come in through fiber to build a high-speed internet connection to all those exact same areas, it's probably somewhere in the order of $3 billion if you look at the reserve prices that were at play in the markets where Starlink won. So to me, that's not a decision that really makes a lot of sense if you view it through the lens of FCC law or the facts here. Again, we're effectively holding Starlink to a build-out requirement years ahead of time. But I do think if you step back and you look more broadly at all of the actions that various agencies are taking, particularly in the wake of President Biden's statement, then I think it makes it a bit more clear in terms of the pattern that it fits within. But stepping back in terms of the FCC, look, I am always going to work hard to meet my colleagues at least halfway, if not further. And I'm very, very confident that we're going to find common ground again on very tough, very difficult issues. We did that, as you noted, for an extended period of time in a 2-2 environment. And I think we're going to continue to do it. There's going to be tough issues along the way. Title II is going to be tough. Digital equity was tough. There's a handful of them. But by and large, I think we're going to continue to roll our sleeves up, work together, and deliver way more often than not unanimous and bipartisan support for items coming out of this agency. And one thing that I think would help is if Congress were to reauthorize our auction authority, then we can get busy producing more items in the spectrum area where I think we tend to work together in a bipartisan manner.
What do you think is the likely outcome of the data breach order that voted today? I mean, what happens next, CRA-wise?
I don't know. I mean, it's going to be a question for other people to decide whether they want to take that up on appeal. I think there's a pretty clear case that can be done. I think that would be the most direct sort of initial question that people that will be regulated by this have to make that decision whether to appeal or not. Again, I think the legal case is pretty strong. I mean, when you, again, step back, a CRA is really strong medicine. It's saying not only can you not put that same rule back, but you screwed up so badly the first time that we are carving a big area around which you can't regulate again because we don't trust you to get it right. And the FCC, steps back into that exact same area carved out by the CRA and tries again. I think that's a pretty clear case for being overturned on appeal, but we'll see.
I am tapped out. I appreciate very much the time.
All right, good to see you. Thanks so much.
Hey, great holidays.
Thanks.